Unit 7, Evolutionary Science, Natural Selection. Let's begin our journey on evolution, starting with natural selection. It may be said that natural selection is a daily and hourly scrutinizing throughout the world, every variation, even the slightest, rejecting that which is bad and preserving and adding up all that is good, silently and insensibly working whenever and wherever opportunity offers, at the improvement of each organic being in relation to its organic and inorganic conditions of life. We see nothing of this slow change in progress until the hands of time has marked the long lapse of ages, and then, so imperfect is our view into long past geological ages that we only see the forms of life are now different from what they formerly were. Quote from Charles Darwin in his book Origin of Species. A little about Charles Darwin. He was an English naturalist, and he was most notable for his research that was done in the Galapagos Island, which actually was an adventure trip that he was on. He was traveling the world. He was very interested in biogeography, which is like the distribution of species in any geographical region. He basically hypothesized that organisms they left South America and they colonized these Galapagos Islands where they were diversified, and this diversification gave rise to new species. And Darwin was specifically interested in the finches of the island. Before we delve on into these theories of natural selection and descent with modification, let's play a game of true or false. You will be given a total of 4 statements. You and a partner must decide if the statement is true or false. Once you choose, you must then justify your logic. Here we go. Statement 1. Natural selection gives organisms what they need to survive. That statement is false. Natural selection has no knowledge of what organisms need. Natural selection just simply acts on genetic variation that leads to survival and reproduction. Next, natural selection acts for the good of a species. That is false. Natural selection has no intentions. It only acts on traits that lead to survival and reproduction. So just because a trait leads to survival doesn't mean it's good for the species. For example, let's say we have a species of predators that have a trait that makes them the best predator. Over time, they will eat all of the prey, right? Because they're the best. And so if they run out of a food source, they will starve and die. Next, natural selection is a process involving organisms trying to adapt to their surroundings. Once again, that statement is false. Natural selection acts on random mutations that have led to a genetic variation in the population. Organisms cannot close their eyes and cross their fingers and just make a wish that they're going to adapt to something. And lastly, survival of the fittest. It is a common phrase that you may have heard before. The term fittest refers to the organism in a population that are the strongest, healthiest, and fastest. That is incorrect. The fittest simply refers to an organism's ability to survive, to reproduce, and to reproduce offspring that reproduce. So, for example, sickle cell anemia is a trait that leads to protection against malaria, but individuals with sickle cell anemia would not be classified as healthy per se. It was Charles Darwin that, during his studies and his life putting together the Origin of Species text, he proposed the idea that descent with modification and which is now our modern day definition of evolution. Evolution is change in the genetic makeup of a population over time. That's what we call descent with modification. Those are heritable traits that change from generation to generation. This is to explain the pattern of descent with modification, or known as evolution, that he observed. He proposed this idea of natural selection. Natural selection is a process or mechanism in which individuals that have certain traits tend to survive and reproduce at higher rates than other individuals because those traits, well, just offer up a better solution to what's going on. So, natural selection acts on the phenotypic variations in a population. And more accurately, some phenotypes they're going to increase or decrease based on an organism's fitness or its ability to survive and reproduce and its genes to carry on. So this is measured by what we call reproductive success. In environments, those can change, causing this selective pressure on populations. But those offspring that produce offspring that reproduce to make more offspring have a higher reproductive success. Darwin proposed that this natural selection theory of natural selection is based on two main observations. One, that the traits are heritable, meaning they are passed on to offspring. And secondly, that more offspring are produced than can survive, meaning that there are infant mortalities, whether you're a pine tree or animals, etc. So you can inherit traits. These are characteristics that are passed from parent to their offspring. Adaptations, they're inherited characteristics of organisms that enhance their survival and reproduction. More offspring are produced than can survive. This leads to competition for limited resources, which result in different levels of survival or different survival ages. These traits that lead to survival are considered, favorable, and they will accumulate within the population genetically, phenotypically. So a population is going to evolve, not individuals. At the time, Darwin was worried about other scientists supporting his work, so he compelled them by comparing natural selection to artificial selection. Artificial selection is the selective breeding of domesticated organisms like plants and animals, and this is to encourage those desirable traits to accumulate in the population. So there was some differences though, like natural selection, it selects traits that are better suited for survival and reproduction within the environment that those organisms are. Artificial selection is essentially done by humans, and we select for more desirable traits. But both can lead to evolutionary change in an organism's population. But natural selection occurs in nature without humans influencing it. Here is a practice FRQ to work on to review natural selection. Practice this in your note packet.